First step in the installation is identifying where we're going to be installing it at. On the cylinder head here, we're going to be using the top two head bolts there, and then also this water pump boss right there. Next step is we're going to do a little bit of pre-assembly just so it's a little bit easier to work with. We're going to be taking this 100mm bolt here, placing it through here, and it will go through here via one of these three long tubes like that. So I'm just going to insert the bolt like that. And then this here goes like that. Then we put it here with the nut. Just leave it a little bit loose, but tight enough where it's not flopping around. So that's what it's going to look like there. And we're on to the next step. In the next step, I'm going to try to simplify this as much as possible from this diagram here. We're going to be inserting these 140mm bolts into this hole here, which mounts the tensioner, this hole here, which goes into the cylinder head, and this hole here, which also goes into the cylinder head. We're going to need two more of these longer spacers here, so we'll just start off by putting this one here where the tensioner will eventually go. And that's just going to hold it in place for now. And then do the same thing with this one here, sliding it in all the way to the back there. The holes will be a little bit tight, but that will help you later in the final assembly, making sure everything is nice and aligned. For this next part here, we actually have a split spacer that gets that as well. So we'll start by taking the, I'll turn this so you can see it. All right, this part's just a little bit different. We're going to install this support plate that's actually going to go up here on the water pump boss. We're going to start with the 140mm, the shorter tube, the support plate, and then this tube here that has a dot on it. And slide it in. Now we're going to be ready to have our two spacer plates, tubes, I'm sorry. They go right there. And now we're going to attach it to the cylinder head. Now that the pre-assembly is done, we're going to install this. These two spacers here will go right here into the cylinder head. We're just going to screw them in just enough to hold it in place. We don't want any sort of binding as we go along here. Get it started there. And next, we're going to install that right there. Take the one remaining leftover tube, your bolt. Make sure that you get it off of that lip right there. That can cause you a little bit of issues. There's plenty of space there, so just go ahead and start it in. But as you tighten it down, just make sure that it doesn't drop down. It shouldn't be an issue, but it's something to be mindful of. Just a pro tip. The one difference in installation is if you have a 2010 to 2015 Camaro water pump like this one, this tensioner boss sits a lot farther forward in space. And so we've supplied a shorter bolt and just a washer to kind of take up the space there. Anyway, I find it easier if you just put it on like so, swing her down, tighten her up. That's going to be the only difference in the installation, so we're going to move back to the truck water pump. We're ready to install the compressor now. One of the things that we want to do is here on the bottom side, so we want to make sure that this sleeve here is actually flush here so that it's not going to interfere with our back plate. Then we're going to take our 40mm and just stick it in like that. You can install it like this as well. I think this is a little bit easier because when you step over here, it kind of gives you something to support it with while you put in your other 8mm bolt, just like that. Rotate her up, just like so, and then you get your other 8mm in just like that. And now we're ready for a little bit of final assembly. We're not going to actually square the bracket up to the cylinder head by doing 2 rounds of tightening. The first round, you're going to just pick up and you see how we have everything just finger tight here. Lift up on the compressor like so, and we're going to start with the cylinder head down here. Tighten it up, don't over tighten it. Then we're going to go here second and here third. Now we're going to do the same thing on the compressor here and here. The bottom one is first here, and we're just going to, like I said, tighten her up and tighten it up here. Do not tighten the back one. That will be a final step. This should be able to slide in and out without any interference. Now we're going to do the same thing with the torque wrench. For 10 millimeter bolts, we call out a spec of 37 foot-pounds. Number 1. Number 2. Number 3. Now we're going to switch back to the compressor here. And that, make sure you adjust back down to 15 foot-pounds. Bottom one first, just light. I almost got it with the first pass, didn't I? I like doing it in this sequence, but we're called out next to do the plate that connects here, so this one hasn't been tightened up yet. But I didn't want to add any extra binding to it. Need a 15 millimeter box end for this one here to go on that, and then just come in like so. She's tight. Now we're ready to take a look at this back connection right here and get it into correct position. Now that we have the bracket squared to the cylinder head and torqued, and the compressor squared to the bracket and torqued, we can take a look at this back here. Now this is a sliding sleeve, and what we want it to do is just kiss this back plate here. We don't want it pushing too hard against it, and we don't really want a gap. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to see, so you might be able to shine a light up in there and see this one has just a little bit of a gap, which is fine. And so we're just going to tap that right there until it comes up and mates against it. Now, it is possible to overdo this, so don't, just keep monitoring on it. The real problem is that this 8 millimeter bolt here and nut is not enough to actually move this sleeve and mate it up against here. The sleeve is actually pretty tight in there. So we don't want to rely on the torquing force, which is only 15 pounds to do this. Tap it in, get it as close as you can, and it'll be great. Once again, we're going to 15 foot-pounds of torque. So go ahead and torque this now. We're now ready to install the tensioner, so we're going to pull this bolt out. One of the reasons why we go ahead and put that in during assembly is everything gets so tight, it's kind of hard to get this in there. This here has a dowel right here and a slot that it slides into. Go ahead and just put that in there, and then you can put on the 10 millimeter nut in the back, and now we're ready to torque that down to 37 foot-pounds. Next, we're going to install the idler pulley here. We're going to take our 12 millimeter bolt, slide it through there. We have our idler post here. Go ahead and grab the pulley and nut at the same time. Now this, being a 12 millimeter, it's actually going to get torqued at 50 foot-pounds. Our last step is to look at the installation instructions here, and there's a belt chart here. And so we're going to identify a couple different things. We're using this alt power steering bracket, which is our K10168, with our 06 power steering pump there, so it has a 5.5 inch pulley. And then we have to identify which alternator we have. This is our Power Master, which is the small case, even though it's not a 105 amp. Anyway, that's going to all affect belt length. And so we look at that chart with those pieces of information. It's going to give us a recommended belt length. A pro tip is when you're installing the belt here is to leave a smooth pulley for the last one. In this case, it's the water pump because of this configuration. That can be a little bit more difficult if you have the truck alt power steering bracket, but we just go ahead and crank this down, and this just slides real nice over the water pump pulley. And there you're going to check all of the grooved pulleys to make sure you're perfectly seated in each one. That way you don't shred a belt. And then we're going to take a look at the tensioner right here. We do our best to give you a belt recommendation that will be exactly right the very first time. However, with variations in pulleys and stuff, we do want you to go ahead and inspect where the tensioner is in its arc. This one here has maximum and minimum stops, actually, and this is about the center line here. And so we want a belt length that is going to take this and be just a little bit tighter than just midway. That way, as the belt ages, stretches just a little bit. Also, a new belt doesn't set all the way down in the groove, so this is going to change as it goes, and so we want a belt that's just a little bit on the tight side. So if you install it and it's a little bit loose, before you run it, run back to the parts store, get the next size smaller. We have a belt chart on the website. Should help you define exactly the belt you need.